So we're really gratified to have artists come and talk to us and for these exhibitions. And this time around, we have Pipi Miller, who's coming to us from, I would say, Christiansburg, Blacksburg.
So I actually live in Giles. My gallery's in Blacksburg, and I used to work in Roanoke, so all over.
So locally, regionally.
Yes.
And she's been doing these large-scale photographs for.
This series about 5 years, 5 or 6 years. So.
I became acquainted with you through you were working at the Moss Center, which is an art center at Virginia Tech, and then saw this piece in a show that we were both in.
Yes, there was that one.
And I thought, wow, I really want to have these here at our school. So I contacted her and asked her if she would share these with us. And they're really wonderful. You don't often see photographs produced on this scale. Plus, they're also imaginatively manipulated to have a kind of an otherworldly quality that I'll talk about some more. But and by way of background, we're originally from
Giles in Southwest Virginia.
And went to Hollins University.
Studied fine art photography at Hollins, and now I own a fine art gallery in Blacksburg. So.
Yeah, so she is coming to us from Blacksburg and will talk to us. I hope maybe you have some questions for her. But first, I'll let her just talk to us a little bit about her process. So,
Sure. Well, I don't have much to say, and really, if you guys want to ask me questions whenever, just yell at me. So like I said, this series has been happening for about 6 years. It kind of came way through a bunch of different stuff. I've always been awed by the natural world, spend a lot of time in it. I find my solace in it. So I started off doing pinhole photography right out of college and did these 24-hour exposures where I would track the sun across the sky. It was kind of trying to encapsulate a long time period into one image. And then these are sort of the opposite, where these are, I imagine, these 2,000-year-old trees, witnessing hundreds of generations walk beneath them, find happiness, find joy underneath of them. So that's my one instant underneath the tree, one photograph. Well, so it's 3 photographs, because when you stand under a tree, it's kind of hard to encapsulate the magnificence of it with one picture. So I take 3, stitch them together into one image. And then I take that one image, I wrap it, warp it, mirror it, multiply it, and then sort of give you a sense of all the time that's been spent under these trees into one image. So that's kind of this series.
That's wonderful. That's a wonderful series too. And that's really interesting when you said about time, because I don't know how many people have anybody ever heard the term pinhole photography. Are you familiar with that at all? You have to, so not that many, but so pinhole photography, is called pinhole photography because instead of like a traditional lens setup, it uses as a photo aperture a very, very tiny hole. Often these cameras are hand-carved.
So mine was handmade. I mean, you can turn your digital camera into one now. You can buy them lenses with the pinhole already put in there for you. So you can use your digital sort of camera body to make these beautiful sort of ethereal images. Or mine were all made out of cookie tins. So it was a cookie tin. I had to hand cut all my film. I had to layer my film in it because the exposures were varied. And then I just stuck it in the tree for 24 hours and got right out.
And because that hole is so tiny,
right,
you have to leave them for a long time. Because it takes a long time for enough light to pass through such a tiny hole to produce a picture, to produce an image. So it's very interesting. So that relates to what you were saying here, is that is a single picture that takes a long time to make.
Right.
And you sort of flip that, so your subject matter took a long time.
Right.
Because there's a tree.
Right, but this was like, 1/200th of a second.
Right. But in this case, the photograph takes only a split second.
Yes.
But the tree is enduring. Right. And then in this one in particular, the sun is visible many, many times through the picture.
Right, whereas where in my pinhole ones, it was just one line, that was the one sun, and that kind of constituted one day. But so like I said, it's been a process getting here, and I'm enjoying these a lot. So I also used to do like macro photography of natural world, so I love Alison Pollock's work of mushrooms, where you're photographing tiny little mushrooms and
Macro
making them.
photography is that where you take a picture of a tiny thing.
Right, like spores that you wouldn't even see with your naked eye, and these are beautiful images that come out.
So you studied photography at Hollins, so I imagine you worked with maybe Bob Salk?
Yes, Bob Salkin was my sort of mentor.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's doing some incredible stuff too. And he's actually moved to where he's not even using a camera. His camera is the scanner, which a lot of people are doing now too. There's
placing things on the
right.
scanner.
And there's an amazing photographer, Colby Covington, who had a show at Radford a number of years ago. And he's actually taking his flatbed scanner out into the world and then holding it up, like facing trees or the pond, and just scanning the image. And it makes these incredible images that are really cool.
Oh.
So you don't need a camera to be a photographer.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. It's alternate ways of using. So you're all familiar with what she's describing as a flatbed scanner. Normally, you would put a document on it, close the lid, it would scan that. But instead, without the cover, just pointing such a scanner out into the landscape and just recording whatever.
Well, and it's got these striations in it. So if he just moves slightly, the next scan line shifts slightly. So if it's just like a tree, then the tree ends up being, line, but like moved all over, like it's moving.
So he does that. He does that purposely?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So.
Well, also, so these non-traditional ways of taking photographs, and going back to the pinhole, the pinhole camera produces certain effects that are slight distortions.
On its own. So like the edges will always kind of be blurry because your center focus is so small and in the middle. And even because it's a long exposure, your clouds moving or the wind shifts the trees, you're getting that blurry, sort of foggy look to it. The best way I can describe every pinhole image I've ever seen is ethereal. That's my word for it.
They also, I've never seen anybody use color film in a pinhole camera.
So I have seen them done when you do the digital ones. They now kind of come out color, but they don't have the same. They don't have the same feel to them.
So yeah, they kind of right. So you got to think about that because the exposure time is, like you said, 24 hours.
Right.
If the sun were to be in the picture, the sun would move across the picture, and it would be recorded in, like you said, a line of this light. So they have a really weird effect. I know that when I was in college and we were doing that, we used Quaker Oats.
But yeah, you can use everything. I've seen. So they make. It's called a Holga camera.
Oh yeah.
And it's a plastic lens. And that was kind of how I got into photography. Is Bob Salkin offered this winter course at Hollins where you had to use this cheap little camera with a plastic lens, and because the lens was plastic, it gave you weird light leaks and odd sort of blurriness and a soft quality to it, but it gave you these beautiful images, and that's where I fell in love with photography. And then the Holga is the easiest one to sort of transform into a pinhole, so everyone transformed their Holga cameras into pinhole cameras.
Right. Okay, well that's really interesting. And then you're doing a kind of an ethereal treatment of your image. Do you think that is that through the process of the manipulation you do after the image?
A lot of it is. So a lot of it is I want that surreal quality. I don't want you to look at this and be like, oh, that's obviously a tree in someone's yard. I want it to feel like it's shifting and growing over time, and you're getting different emotions from it. So I leave a lot of the sort of, when I'm mirroring them, I'm trying not to match them exactly, and I leave a lot of the overlays, kind of the opacity is not 100%, so I leave them so you can see through the other image to give you that sort of surreal quality to it. And some of the branches don't obviously match up quite right, so.
Yeah, but that adds to the...
It does. It adds to the emotion of the piece.
Because it immediately announces that it's not simply a record of...
Right, what I'm seeing while I'm there. It's more about the emotion while I'm there than the...
What about this large scale?
Well, I don't know, that's, you know, so I started small, of course, and I specialize in making fine art prints for other artists, so I have a really fancy printer that I use for my work. And then I started printing these small, and then one of my other artists that I carry at the gallery named Joni Pinkowski works big, and she does these 80-inch doors and 4 panels, and she keeps telling me, Pipi, go big, go big. And so I kept going bigger, you know, I got to this size, then I got to this size, and then I was like, oh, so then I got to this size, so I don't know, they just keep getting bigger. And they have more impact that way. When I do print them small, they just don't feel the same.
But there's a problem with printing large, which is resolution. So how do you deal with the fact? So when you print something large, it often will break up and become indistinct, or worse, become pixelated. And that's a problem.
Yeah, it is. So, but a lot of that's just basic. So I have a really nice camera, and I have a really nice printer. So those are the basics that you sort of need to print big. Like, don't print from your iPhone photo this big because it's not going to look good. And then also, like I said, when I'm out in the world and I see a tree that I say, oh, I want to record this. We felt something under this tree. I think this is going to be my next image. I will take that tree with my super nice camera. 4 different images of that same tree. But I don't consider those different images. I consider, once I stitch them together digitally in Photoshop, that's my one image that I start with. But so even that image is already 1 gigabyte file size. So then working from that image, I'm able to print this big pretty easily. So
that reminds me of an old sort of computer term that applies very much to Photoshop of any kind, which is garbage in, garbage out.
Yes.
It means that your output is only as good as your input.
Right.
And so if you start with trash, it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to end up with trash. So the secret kind of is you've got to start with a really high resolution.
And that's not to say, I mean, I've seen beautiful photos blown up to probably that size from an iPhone, but you are going to get that pixelation, you are going to get that sort of digital memory of it. So yeah, it took me a little trial and error to figure out how big I could go. And this one actually, I was a little worried about even this one, even with my big file size, but it printed beautifully. So.
Well, I remember that it was one of the reasons I asked that is that I remember that in the 1990s, I guess it was, some art photographers like Sidney Sherman, and I think also Chuck Close and some other people who worked with large-scale images and photographic images, they started using this camera that I think that was developed either by Kodak or Polaroid. I don't know which company developed it, but it is an enormous camera. And
right.
It's like there are 3 in the world that are this size, and if you're an artist and you want to use it, you have to write a grant to get.
Right.
Familiar with that?
A little bit, but like even that is just sort of basic. So you think of Ansel Adams. Doing his large scale, he's losing a large format camera. So his negative is not this big, like you're getting with your 35mm. His negative is this big.
Right.
So that translates into being able to blow it up bigger.
Right.
So even without the digital technology, it's the same. Right, exactly.
And they were like doing contact prints.
Right.
And which made them very sharp.
Right.
And that's another way to do it. But to work with a camera that's this big.
Yeah. It's a little unwieldy, I can imagine.
Okay, so that's really good. Can I ask you what exactly camera you use?
I just actually switched this year, so I was using the Canon Mark III, which is 5D Mark III, which is my favorite. But I switched this year to mirrorless, because everyone says go mirrorless. And
Mirrorless.
yeah, so when you're right. It's not reflecting the image onto something else, it's just straight, yeah.
So who makes that?
This is a Canon. It's their R5, I think, is their new one, and I've been really pleased with it. I bought it mainly for work because I shoot in. I also do the Masa Center install photos, so I go into their galleries and document what show they have hanging right now. And I'm not allowed to use lights or a flash, so for low light, the mirrorless is really nice. And I find it's working well in the forest when I'm in low light too. So,
that's great.
yeah. So this one was probably shot with the mirrorless. The rest of these are actually probably shot with my older camera. So.
Well, do you folks have any questions? You have any questions about this stuff? You want to know about it?
I got a few comments. Like that one right there, when I first glanced from a distance, it looks like a bunch of little white-faced monkeys down at the bottom. From over here.
I think I see.
Right?
It's like a whole bunch of them there.
Yeah, okay.
And then this one over here, I see it's like a mask.
There's actually there's a term for that, and I can't think of it. That it's in abstract art, humans are prone to find faces. We look for the faces to find some sort of, something recognizable in it.
So if you look at this part, it looks like a line that was kind of laid there. And up here is 2 sheep.
So you see a whole bunch of things in there.
Yeah.
That's cool. Anybody else? Yes.
Do you just do through nature or do you do other parts? Like, do you just do trees or do you do flowers?
Well, so trees are my favorite, obviously. But this, this is a cave formation. So it's really just when we spend a lot of time in nature. And the little figure you see in the mall is my son. And so we spend a lot of time hiking and exploring, and it doesn't have to be trees, although that is just what resonates with me personally. But on mountaintops, that one's in Hanging Rock, West Virginia. And that's just a rock formation that was incredible. And this is in, Blacksburg, it's a nature preserve in Blacksburg, and those are actually cave formations. So, and then I have done a couple commissions for people where they wanted me to integrate architectural details into them, which I did, but I would never show them as my art because I wasn't as crazy about them. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see this boy. You see him in multiple places.
Right, and like I said, this is also, you'll see him, but that's the same exact image. So that is still our moment there. But I wanted it to feel like there were multiple moments and he was fading into the distance and experiencing things, so.
And again, it's like...
And it gives it a sense of scale. This is, you don't know that these are the redwoods out in California. So.
To be honest, it's kind of an unexpected scale because, the trees look like they could be very large trees until you see them.
Right, like this one is an actual small tree just in our backyard that was covered with ice. This is an actually enormous tree down in North Carolina that we just drove by as we were going to a restaurant one night, and it was incredible, one of the live oaks.
Well, I think it's really interesting for people maybe even to realize it, but maybe not everybody does realize. You refer to this as a tree.
Oh yeah.
Because it looks like a grove of trees.
No, but this is
right?
one single tree.
Because you duplicated and mirrored and redoubled the image, it becomes this grove of trees.
Right.
That feels like something quite believable. You could imagine this arching of 2 trees coming, but it's really one so that the level of manipulation is, I guess, what I'm getting at. That I think some people might not realize how much manipulation.
Oh yeah, it's a good probably. Total time. I don't spend 100 hours straight manipulating, but I say each one's probably got about 100 hours of computer time in them. So.
Well, and people also might not be aware that manipulating negatives is as old as photography. And that's
one of my favorite photographers, who's one of my biggest inspirations, is Jerry Ullsman. And he did all so he created these surreal landscapes where there'd be like a circle in the middle of an ocean and the boat was going into the circle, but the rest of the ocean, just kind of this, oh, that's a landscape, but something's off, it doesn't feel quite right, and he did it all by cutting negatives and cutting things. 60s, 70s.
Okay. But even if you go back to like Ansel Adams.
Oh, yes.
Ansel Adams, who's a real landscape pioneer, who photographed many very famous images of Yosemite and southwestern and western United States. Manipulated and again, they had to manipulate the actual, like you said, cutting up negatives or doing a lot of darkroom work.
Right, so if you work with Adobe, there's a tool, called, called brightening and darkening or something like that, and
Burning and dodging.
burning and dodging, right, that's it. That used to be done in a dark room with a flashlight or with your hand. You know, you'd stand under your enlarger and you wanted this part, you know, darker, then you would hold your hand over it while the light was filtering in, and then you would expose a little bit of this side, and that's how he got, before neutral density filters were invented, that's how he got his sky and his background to look the same. As if you just took a picture of it, you'd get a white sky even if there were clouds in the sky. So manipulation's been happening forever, yes.
So it's definitely been a part of photography right from the middle to
Right.
when it was first invented.
And a lot of photographers will turn their nose down at it, like, oh, these are digitally manipulated. Well, yes, but that's part of photography.
Photography has always
So,
done that.
right.
Yeah, so that's what I think is worth it. Does anybody have an interest in photography, like thinking about taking a lot of pictures, anybody? I mean, everybody takes a lot of pictures with their phones, but does anybody work with photography in terms of trying to make images? Yeah?
Someone, Shoko and talents, took photos of nature film and stuff.
Nature film. Okay. Anybody else? Ever seen photographs this large? These are really big. It's a big undertaking. And then how about so tell me a little bit about the print. What is the print? Is it pigment?
So they're called archival pigment prints, which is just a fancy term for digital print. It's just my printer uses really nice inks. It's got 12 different inks in the printer, so 12 different colors instead of your little printers that have cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. This has light black and violet and green and orange and light cyan, and so you get a whole, even with the black and whites, like you'll notice, these are not pure black and whites. That one's a little redder tinged. That one's probably got a little bit more green tint to it. But so it's just it's a big Epson printer. It's 44 inches wide. So this is about as wide as I can go, but I can go as long as I want.
It's a roll.
It's a roll.
And that's archival paper, meaning
It is.
archival ink and archival paper, that means that they will last a very, very long
And that's why I don't put glazing on these. So like glass over them. Most of the time with your fine art, you'd be like, oh, the sun's gonna ruin it. You need to put it under something. These, supposedly the inks have their own protection against the sun. I don't know if it's ever been really tested, but they claim that it does. So, and then these are mounted on, so it's printed on just paper, and then they're mounted on what's called gator foam, which my gallery, we custom frame is how I make my money. So I framed all these. And it makes them really lightweight, easy to transport, and pretty durable. Like you can run your hand over them and not hurt them. So.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, gator board's kind of a little like foam core.
It's like foam core. It's got a harder substrate to it, so that these won't warp over time. Foam core will end up warping at this scale. So.
Okay. Yeah.
She mentioned earlier about the cheap plastic lens.
Mm-hmm.
That's, of course, your phones have got those on it.
Right.
And mine has gotten scratched up and cleaned and stuff. And I was up on the Parkway several months ago, and it's an old tree that looks like it's dead,
Mm-hmm.
and the sun was out. So I got in a position where I could picture the sun in between the tree, like the tree was holding it, but because the lens was so scratched up, it came out with the picture came out looking like this here.
Oh yeah. Just kind of neat,
Yeah.
right?
Gives it like an effect.
Well, like I don't mind that, with the pinhole you'll get light leaks and things like that. And so that's what, I don't mind this kind of effect. This looks like a light leak to me,
Mm-hmm.
in your camera, so.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of those older cameras, or old large format cameras, are often prone to this.
Right, you have to constantly repair them, and especially the ones with the big bellows, those will get cracks in them all the time. And but like I said, I don't mind that at all. So I mean, there's a whole movement where you took your negative into the darkroom and scratched it up to give you those sort of effects. So.
Right, and I wasn't going to, but I guess I will now mention Sally Mann.
Oh, right.
Because Sally Mann, famous photographer, also from Virginia, but she uses that large format camera, and she cultivates those leaks and
Oh, yeah.
cracks and seepage of light. So, you know.
Yeah, she
the
talks
whole-
about it being a process of the camera aging to, you know,
the
like,
camera,
right?
camera
So-
aging. And she takes our work, a lot of her photographs are kind of about history and time. Oh, also, a Holland graduate.
She's a Hollins graduate, so she had a show there while I was there, which was really impressive to get to meet her. You know, her first, she's famous for her children's photographs, of course, but she did a show of, they were all old Civil War battlefields, and they were done very kind of blurry and ethereal, like a pinhole would feel.
Right.
And then she printed them huge. They were large scale prints, so.
Great. Yeah. These are really wonderful, and thank you for sharing them
Oh,
with
no
us.
problem.
And I don't know. Maybe I'll see you up in Blackbird.
Yeah, right, I'm around.
Okay. Well, let's have a round of applause for Pipi Miller. Thank you for joining the work here.